Good afternoon, everybody. You have tuned into the Rebel News live stream. It is July 15th, 2020, and welcome aboard. Now, I can almost hear some of the groans of disappointment. You were expecting the big boss man himself, Ezra Levant, to be here, but how shall we say this? Ezra is on assignment. That's, I think, what we usually say when we don't know where somebody is. No, but Ezra's working hard on something. And in his place, it's me, David Menzies, and I'm joined by my fabulous co-host in Calgary, our very own Special K, Keean the Boy Wonder, Bexte. How you doing out there in Calgary, Keean?
I'm doing great, David. I just hope that I can keep up with you.
Well, there's a punchline there somewhere, but I'm not allowed to say this anymore. But now, Keean, as what I usually do with my lovely co-host Sheila Gunn-Reid, who, of course, you're filling in for today, is we explain to the folks what it is we're doing here, in addition to talking about some of the news stories of the day. We have a little thing called the Super Chat. And would you care to weigh in and explain how that works, my friend?
Yes, so the Super Chats work by you typing in a dollar amount and then a message that we will read. The messages sort of fly by during these live streams, so it's hard to keep up with every single one, but these live Super Chats make it so that we can see what you guys are saying, and it looks like some folks have already contributed,
Wow.
which this really keeps us going, and it also shows the boss man Ezra that people actually like seeing me on these live streams. So if we could show up Ezra on his own show, that wouldn't be a bad thing. So I'll catch up with the ones that are waiting for us right now. They actually were there, David, before the stream started. Kane Enmark, $2 says, "Hey guys, Keean is my favorite reporter." Well, man, what a way to open today. I don't mind that at all. Apu Baker Al Puff Daddy says, for $50, the liberal left virtue signals because they're incompetent and lazy, as Anthony Fury once stated. It's a lot easier to change team names and mascots than it is to deal with addiction, poverty, and domestic violence within the First Nations community. I mean, it's true. You look at some of the issues that are facing First Nations communities. Even one right near me right now. I'm actually not in Calgary. I'm just sort of near the Siksika Reserve right now today, because I was actually out watching that comment last night. And in the Siksika Reserve, you see it appears to be a third world. It's a third world area. You drive into it, the houses are nice before, then you drive in and the houses are boarded up. Some have been burnt down. The roads are decrepit. There's hitchhikers everywhere. There's huge social problems within these communities. And this fella put it pretty succinctly here. Changing a team name isn't fixing any of that. Yeah. He also posted another one. Again, he says, how have the lives of Native youth in northern Indigenous communities been improved after John A. Macdonald's statue came down? How is the situation with the drinking water in First Nations communities improved? Exactly what I'm saying. That is not doing any good whatsoever, not a lick of good for these folks. It's just doing good for white liberals in suburban Edmonton and Toronto. Sorry, David. But it's not doing anyone good except for people who are already well off.
You're 100% right, Keean. And let us talk about the Redskins, because they were in the news on Monday when Dan Snyder, the owner of the team, who for years, maybe even decades, vowed that that nickname and logo was not going anywhere. Well, he bent his wounded knee, and there's going to be some other name for the Washington franchise. Oh, I don't know, the Fightin' Spirit Unicorns, maybe, who knows. And I'm just wondering, yeah, like you alluded to, Keean, if I'm living on, say, the Grassy Narrows Reserve, am I concerned more about the name and logo of an American football team or getting clean drinking water? But it's more than that, Keean. I want to point out a few inconvenient truths. First of all, Redskins, people will say, well, you wouldn't call a team Blackskins or Brownskins, would you? Well, of course, the Redskins doesn't refer to the pigment of native skin. It refers to the war paint, the dye that they used when they would go to war, they would go on the warpath, what have you, and so it's not that the nickname is offensive to the skin pigmentation. It's basically a nickname that is offensive to a hue of paint or dye. So it's not the same thing as saying black skins or brown skins. Another thing, it was a native that actually designed the original logo of the Washington Redskins. But in terms of current events, I can tell you, Keean, in 2016, the Washington Post commissioned a poll exclusively to Native Americans. And it was all about the Washington Redskins nickname and logo. Is it offensive? And more than 90% said no. In fact, they embraced it as a badge of honor. Myself, months before that poll was published, I went to a Toronto park that was near a Native resource community center, so I knew there'd be natives there. And I don't believe we found one native that said they were offended by the Washington Redskins name and logo. In fact, I brought this beautiful $50 brand new baseball cap with the Washington Redskins logo on it, and I was showing it to one native. And he loved it so much, he wanted to keep it. And I gave it to him, even though I wanted to keep it too. So the question arises, Keean, if the vast majority of natives who literally have skin in the game when it comes to the Redskins nickname and logo are not offended. And by the way, I'm not talking about the spokesingers for native organizations, part of the professional gripe industry. I'm talking about the people that live on and off the reserve. If they're not offended, then who are we preventing from being offended by eradicating this name and logo?
Nobody. But I have to point out something that you said about the name being Redskins. I don't think you're allowed to point out that indigenous tribes were actually warfaring nations before the white man came. You're not supposed to mention that, David.
No, you're not. And, and because we have a specific type of politically correct narrative. And by the way, as those signs say in the national parks, Keean, do not feed the animals, because the animals get even more dependent and belligerent in terms of getting a free handout of food. These social justice warriors, and you're quite right, most of them are white. They're not even native, for goodness sakes. This was their prime target, the Washington Redskins. This was ground zero. But now you can expect to see the Braves, the Chiefs, the Indians, the Blackhawks, one by one, those will be eradicated. And when that's done, Keean, and I'm only half joking here, you're going to see all kinds of other grievances about sports team nicknames, like any nickname that has to do with patriotism or the industrial military complex. So goodbye Columbus Blue Jackets, New England Patriots, Philadelphia 76ers. And then you're going to see PETA's going to want their pound of flesh. So Lions and Tigers and Bears, oh my, well, Chicago and Detroit, you better work on new nicknames for those two. It is madness, and when you acquiesce to the mob an inch, you're going to have to give them a mile.
You hit the nail right on the head, and that's happening in Canada right now with the Edmonton Eskimos.
Yes.
Just yesterday, Boston Pizza tweeted out this tweet saying that they are pulling their sponsorship from Edmonton's CFL team. They wouldn't name it because they're just such triggered SJWs. They cannot come to, and the point being here that the Edmonton Eskimo name is not offensive in the slightest. In fact, the Eskimo people who call themselves Eskimos, because they're not politically correct up in Nunavut, they're proud of the team, and that's their favorite team. But Boston Pizza is pulling their sponsorship from it, and it's going to reflect poorly on Boston Pizza at the end of the day. So if anyone has some recommendations on some replacements for like mid-priced sports dining, I would be happy to hear your suggestions in the chat.
Okay, Keean, let's play the game Boston Pizza is playing. Despite its name, Boston Pizza, I believe, is a Vancouver-based pizza chain. Boston, let's see now. Wasn't that the home of the Boston Tea Party? And by the way, the original home of the Washington Redskins. And didn't the members of the Boston Tea Party dress up as Mohawk warriors when they threw those 452 chests of tea into Boston Harbor? Oh, you know what, Boston Pizza? I don't like that word Boston. And by the way, Dan Snyder, you owner of the Washington Redskins, when you come up with a new nickname, in for a penny, in for a pound, move the team out of Washington. Because you do know that Washington is a bad word right now. We're supposed to be tearing down statues of that white slave owner, of that symbol of white supremacy. So if Redskins is verboten, I say that the name of the municipality he's playing in is verboten too, Keean.
Yeah, scrap it all. Scrap it all. Actually, I'll catch up on some of these super chats before they get out of hand. Julian Borges, I don't know. Many wealthy figures are promoting Marxism. Why? It's a good question. Apu Baker Al Puff Daddy, he's just carrying the show today. Packers are offensive to vegans. Steelers are offensive to environmentalists. And Cougars are offensive to sexy older women. What do you think about that?
Yes, well, I believe, what is the scale? It's Cougars are 35 to 50. Then 50 to 65 are Badgers, and then 65 and over are Wolverines. Don't ask me how I know this, but I believe that's the scale. But I mean, we're being flippant and comical. But this is the thing, Keean. How far do you go in terms of the grievance industry? And what does it mean at the end of the day? I'll give you an early example of sports team nickname political correctness that happened in the 90s. And funnily enough, in Washington, the NBA team. The NBA team used to be called the Washington Bullets. And then the owner thought, because of Washington's off the charts at the time gun crime rate, you know what, Bullet, that kind of endorses handgun violence and illegality. So we're going to call ourselves the Washington Wizards. Can you imagine, Keean? I mean, what are we doing? Going to a Harry Potter convention? The Washington Wizards? It just sounds so lame. But here's my question to you. When the Washington NBA team changed its nickname, did gun crime plummet in D.C.? Of course not. It's all about optics, isn't it, my friend?
Certainly. Yeah. That's exactly it. Some good optics, though, just to change the topic a little bit. I hear that your assaulter was arrested.
You heard correctly, my friend. Now, Keean, I think you and I are the journalism version of Rock'em Sock'em Robots, except we're not throwing the haymakers. We're usually getting them. We try to be gentlemen out in the field. And what happened, of course, on Saturday, June 20th, and when I say we, that's our ace cameraman, Mocha, and I, went out to City Park in Kingston. And it was a fascinating day, Keean, because for several days leading up to this event, there was all kinds of social media chatter. Antifa, or Antifa Light as the case may be, would be there. We're going to tear down that statue of Sir John A. Macdonald, because that's what you do in cancel culture. I could immediately tell upon arriving at City Park, Keean, there was no chance of that happening. You see, you would actually need an engineering degree to tear down a statue like that, and I think these were all multiple graduates of gender studies. And we decided to report on this gathering. I did not disturb the speeches by the ringleaders. I did not go to anyone for interviews. I simply went some 60 meters away from the mob and did a stand-up, i.e. an introduction about the news event of the time. And like ants to an open jam jar, these hooligans came towards us. But enough of me talking. Before we get to the person arrested, I believe Mr. Producer has some video queued up for the video evidence of what happened that day in Kingston.
Excuse me, ma'am?
No, we're not doing right here.
Oh, why is that? What makes me a racist, ma'am?
Okay, we
Have you
know.
heard your own words? Because I just
touch
listened
the
to
camera,
you.
please.
Don't touch me.
touch the
Do
camera.
not touch me.
You do not touch the camera. Ma'am, you said we're racist? Why is that? And you use a lot of bad language, not very ladylike language, I must say.
I'm not a f***ing lady. Get out of here.
Oh, okay then. What about yourself, ma'am? You were saying something as well, I believe.
I said that I thought your speech was offensive and inaccurate.
Oh, it was. What did I get wrong? Kingston's motto is not where history and innovations. Right?
Do you believe that removing a statue removes history?
What would you call it?
I would say that we're no longer celebrating a racist creep. The history doesn't.
Time to go.
What are you pouring water? Hey, excuse me.
Time to go. Time to go. Time to go. Time to go. Shoo.
As you can see,
Get your boy out
these
of here.
people.
It's a
park. It's a public park.
Do not push us. Time to go.
Do not push us. We're
Get
making
your
our
boy-
way out.
Okay, good.
one wants you here.
Good. Get your boy out. Get your boy out.
Get
You're gonna get egged. Get out.
Well, you're going to threaten me by throwing an egg at me, sir?
Don't.
Get out of here.
It's a public park. Come on.
Whoa. Let's move over.
Oh, you're a tough guy behind that mask, aren't you?
Get out.
Oh, and you too.
Get out.
Huh? This is your idea?
Let's go.
Get
Let's
your
go.
boy. You're gonna lose that camera, kid. You're gonna lose it. Go. Go.
This is. Hey,
Touch me. Get the
don't
fuck
touch
out.
him. Okay, so as you saw, we had Gatorade splashed on our bodies and our equipment. We were pushed, we were shoved. I took a bottle off my forehead, and you might be wondering in the aftermath, just who was that masked man? Well, you know what, folks? I've got some good news. We know his name now. The alleged assailant is 30-year-old Robert Warner. Just a few days ago, police charged Mr. Warner, and the charges are assault with a weapon and mischief/obstruct property under $5,000. He was later released on conditions, and he is scheduled to appear in court at a later date. I somehow think Mr. Warner, without his mask on and without 200 Antifa types surrounding him, isn't going to demonstrate the kind of bravado he demonstrated in the park that day. Well, it was not bravado, it was outright bullying. It was a mob reacting to a couple of individuals practicing journalism. But what I want to point out about this nice piece of news that we received from the Kingston Police Service is the fact that none of this could have been accomplished without a considerable financial investment. Take, for example, the bodyguard that we had on site that day. That was $600. After that, our lawyers charged several $100s to basically write letters to the Kingston Police Service, pressing them to follow up with an arrest, which thankfully they did. No other.
Keean, let me first begin by saying what was so perversely ironic about that day, although the irony was lost on the mob of thugs, is that this was being billed as an anti-colonialism rally. And yet, what did we see? The absolute worst elements of colonialism being embraced by the mob, i.e., pushing us off property they did not own. It was a public park. Responding with violence to those that they had an issue with. And these are the anti-colonialists. But, it is amazing, Keean, that if not even 1/10 of what happened to us, if we had just been, if we were, say, a CBC reporter who had been verbally assaulted, or there was a nasty word or a sexual reference thrown our way, it would be almost a cause for a national commission. But for us, we have to fight. We have to get a lawyer. We have to pester the Kingston Police Service, and in order to get some modicum of justice. And I just think, and you've been on the receiving end of this too, Keean, how dare these people in the public square feel so entitled to use violence and vandalism to shut down the practice of journalism? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it is the hardest part of my job, not returning fire. I think some of these people, they have sat in their mom's basement for too long and they've forgotten what it was like to be punched in a high school locker room because they were being a negligent little dweeb back when they were in their teenage years. They forgot the feeling of some knuckles in the face, and it feels a little bit it feels very tough to not do that, but and return what they're doing to you. But you know that the second that we do that, we'll be prosecuted like that immediately. We'll be in jail. We won't get released on conditions. We might not even get bail because we would not have the law on our side. The law is on these little Antifa prudes' side, which is unfortunate.
That's a very good point, and I can tell you, Keean, I can tell our viewers this, if you do some internet searching of when the tables are turned on the Antifa types, the same types who want to defund or even abolish the police, they go screaming like little crybabies to the police and cry about assault. And when I say assault, they do this thing where they deliberately standing in your way while you're walking, and if you just even brush them as you're walking by, they start screaming as though they just took a bullet in their ankle or something. And by the way, folks, I have to make this solicitation because we do not get government funding, and nor would we take it if offered. I feel that would put us in a conflict of interest situation. So if you can go to journalistdefensefund.com, that's journalistdefensefund.com, people like Keean and Sheila and myself, we shouldn't have to deal with this kind of thuggery, but these people, for whatever reason, feel entitled to let their fists do the talking. And that's the other thing, Keean. If you're having a demonstration, if you're having a protest, how easy is it to preach to the converted? The 200 to 300 people that were there that day, they're all on the same page. It's going to be so cool to throw eggs at the Sir John A. Macdonald statue. But why not, in a calm, rational, logical manner, reach out to me and our audience and say, this is why we think this statue has to come down. Plead your case in a civil fashion. But no, it's almost as though we have so much footage where you see the hand going into the camera lens. I'm beginning to think, am I supposed to be like a fortune teller here? Am I supposed to be reading your palm lines, right? Because what is that?
You mentioned the videos online, if they Google it, of Antifa types getting the other end of the bargain. And it made me remember some videos that I've been watching. And it is one of my favorite pastimes to sit at my computer with a nice cold beer and watch a montage of these Antifa losers in Portland and Seattle and Toronto and Vancouver and Washington, D.C. and in New York. Watch them just get walloped by some regular American or regular Canadian who aren't putting up with what they're doing. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of videos of this happening, and I love it. I love it. It's my favorite thing in the world. But I also want to point out to you, when I was saying that your assaulter was arrested, I wasn't necessarily talking about this one, because you've had two assaulters arrested in the past little while. Jonathan, a.k.a. Jessica Yaniv, was also arrested, albeit for a different reason. He was arrested because he assaulted me, and the police followed up with me. I'm not still at this point. I'm still not sure why they didn't follow up with your assault, because that was actually with a weapon. But at the end of the day, this predator being in jail, I think, is good one way or the other, however it happens.
Oh, I hope so. And you're quite right. I'm very glad that you're going to get, hopefully, some justice with what Yaniv did with you. What he did with me last August, Keean, it was actually assault with a weapon. I took at least 5 shots of a steel cane off my head and shoulders, along with Mama Yaniv shoving her iPad into my throat. That was her mode of operation. They're such vile people, my goodness. But they are always given the benefit of the doubt for some reason. And by the way, just to bring it back to the Kingston thing, because one thing we're following up on that, you have a mob of almost 300 people at City Park. They have stated on social media that we might be tearing down the statue of the first Prime Minister of Canada. And Keean, not a single police officer nor a police cruiser. Then this mob marches without a permit on city streets to City Hall in Kingston and lights an effigy of Sir John A. Macdonald, puts it on fire. Again, not a single police officer. And by the way, I'm not blaming the rank and file members of the Kingston Police Service. I've had dealings with them. I think the guys I met were fantastic. What we were told, Keean, is that this mob, before June 20th, went out to either the city or the police department and said to them that because of what's happened south of the border, i.e. the George Floyd incident, we don't want to see any police. That would be triggering to us. And they got their way. Now, Mayor Brian Patterson, his communications person, said, we are not aware of this. So I went to the Kingston Police Service chief. She has not responded to my email or my voicemail. I went out to their communications person. They haven't responded either. But Keean, what in blue blazes, if this is true, and this tip came to us by somebody in law enforcement in Kingston, if this is true, that we're now going to have, the Antifa types and criminals directing the police service to stay away because you're triggering to us, and the police acquiesced to that, what is this going to mean? Like the rise of vigilantism? Because this, to me, Keean, is a complete dereliction of duty.
Dereliction of duty is a very apt way to put it. Antifa, their number one goal is to get away with what they're doing by intimidating society. They're terrorists. They are terrorists. Donald Trump thinks so. The majority of level-headed Americans and Canadians think so as well. And they thrive when they're not able to be held accountable. And guess what? The only people holding them accountable are citizen journalists and Rebel News, people that are able to expose them one way or the other, whether a mask slipped. Andy Ngo is a great example of this. Andy Ngo has done amazing work in the United States to the point of personal peril, actually. Come to his home, vandalize it, threaten his life and his family's lives because he's done such a good job exposing them, handing information to the police, or maybe not directly, but the police get his information and use it to great use. And has, I think it's safe to say Andy Ngo has been personally responsible for dozens of different folks in the Antifa movement seeing jail time, which I think is just great. But my point here is that the police wouldn't be doing it otherwise, because the police vacate the situation as fast as possible because they don't want to lose their badge when a bunch of complaints come in because they're accused of some sort of misconduct because they handled the situation well. It's hard to handle terrorists in the moment perfectly every time, so they leave. They just give up. And it's to the detriment of society.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's two elements to this. There are some police that subscribe to the acronym FIDO, which means F it, drive on. In other words, you see a crime happening, and because of the identity politics at play, you realize this is a lose-lose situation. So we're just going to pretend we didn't see it and keep moving. But what happened in Kingston, and I believe that the police deliberately stood down on the orders of the chief. I don't have proof of that, but that's what was told to me. Because, Keean, think of it. If you were running the Kingston Police Department and you know ahead of time that there's going to be a mob of almost 300 people and their intent is to pull down a statue, wouldn't you at least have one police cruiser, even an undercover cruiser, monitoring what's happening? Because this is illegal. And yet they were absent without leave. I think it's a disgrace. And again, it's not my words of venom here aren't directed to the rank and file of the Kingston Police Service. It is their higher ups that are ordering them to stand down, and that's a disgrace.
Certainly is. And I'll just catch up with these super chats.
Oh yes,
keep sending them to me. The Packers are offensive to guys. LOL. That's maybe some guys.
I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole, and I'm 11 feet away.
Have you heard of the Wayfarer links to child trafficking? No, I haven't. I'll check that out though. Will the Sask Rough Riders now have to change their name because of Teddy Roosevelt? Time to cancel these little leftist wackos. Little leftist wackos. Yes, I would agree with that. the Saskatchewan Roughriders is now this. Maybe this is my youth showing, but what does Roughriders have to do with Teddy Roosevelt, David?
Well, wasn't that the name? I believe, and I stand to be corrected, but wasn't that the name of the regiment, if you will? They were known as the Rough Riders. They would go out. These were the horsemen. But I will say this, and please correct me. I'm just going by memory. But for the longest time, Keean, before your time probably, because you're so young, the CFL, which was typically 9 teams, 2 franchises were called the Rough Riders, right? Ottawa's original franchise name was Rough Riders. They couldn't get it back because the guy that, a former owner that got the trademark, wanted too much for it. So now they're the Red Blacks. And by the way, is maybe Ottawa, the Ottawa CFL franchise, are they visionaries in terms of nicknames, coming up with a name basically that means nothing, like a manufacturer name like Xerox or Kodak? I mean, Red Black. What's a Red Black? I mean, until that nickname was coined, I've never heard of that term. So, but then again, it's brilliant because who would get offended by the word Red Black unless you think it's a derogatory term to natives and black people? So I think I'm overthinking this right now.
David, it's hard to keep up with these progressives. The point of a sports name is to be sort of like intimidating, right? Which is why I don't understand why it was offensive in the first place, right? Like it's not like they're saying that they're comparing them to animals or something like that when it comes to the Redskins or the Eskimos. They're saying that this is like a noble thing, and we think that they are they can be so intimidating that they're worthy of being that a team of strong men is worthy of being named after them. And that's the point of it. That's why the Calgary Flames or the Atlanta the Hurricane. Where's the Hurricanes in the NHL? I don't know this.
Carolina.
Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it, is to be you're proud of these people. So I just don't get the leftists. The problem is I think most of these leftists don't watch sports at all, and they have no idea what's going on. So
you know what, Keean, what you just said was a very important point. I mean, let's take a look at the Atlanta baseball team, the Braves, and they use native icons such as the tomahawk. And if the Atlanta baseball team was to use native icons, and their nickname was the Cowards, the Atlanta Cowards. Yeah, I think if I'm a native, I don't like that. But you're called the Braves. Bravery. That's as positive as it gets. Who would be offended by that, native or non-native? And again, like you said, the left, they just don't get it, I'm afraid.
No, yeah, you don't have a team called the Vancouver Soy Boys,
Give them time, Keean.
So, Marcus, yeah. One day, I'll stand corrected, probably in like 10 years. Marcus Starr says, how about the Washington Menzies? I could get behind that.
Oh, could you say that again, Keean? You just faded out there.
Okay. Marcus Starr says, how about the Washington Menzies?
Hey, as long as you cut me into, say, 2% of the merch sales,
1%.
I'm happy. And by the way, that's an investment play for all you sports fans out there. Buy up as much Washington Redskins merchandise as you can. Keep the tags on it. Don't wear it. It's become an instant collector's item. That might already be outdated information. I would imagine that stuff is just flying off the shelves already.
Yeah, certainly. Apu Baker, Puff Daddy, is my favorite guy in the world. Keean, you've met little Greta live and in person a few times. What is your honest impression of her? Is she a victim as much of an activist? What's your impression of her parents and handlers? This is a great question. You know what? I was actually writing a book on Greta, and I stopped because nobody cares about her anymore. I tweeted it a while ago. She's 3 crises behind, from to Black Lives Matter, and there's going to be another one here shortly once BLM runs out of steam. She's like nobody cares about her anymore. So maybe I should keep writing that book. I don't know. I'll take the viewer's advice on that one. But your question, what's your honest impression of her? Is she as much of a victim as an activist? I think that she was a victim and that she's in this position, and I don't think that she should be in this position, and I don't think an adult at the age of 30 is going to appreciate it because her life has been branded forever. It's unchangeable. She will forever be someone that the entire world recognizes, and that comes with some serious baggage. It's not always fun. Even working for Rebel, when I'm recognized at the Costco or wherever it is, sometimes it's nice, sometimes it's flattering, but sometimes it's a little overbearing. Sometimes you're out on a date and you want to have some privacy. With Greta Thunberg, she will never have that, ever. Every single person will always recognize her, and that's some serious baggage. I think she's a victim in that regard. Her parents should have been a little bit more sensible. But on the other hand, now what's in the past is in the past. She's now 17 years old, and I don't want to sound creepy here when I know this, but 17 years old in about 6 months. So she's going to turn 18 on January 2nd, 2021, if the world lasts that long. And she will be an adult. She'll have to take responsibility for her own decisions, for some of the lies that she said, for some of the radical opinions that she's held, for the trauma that she's caused young folks. Some young people were really traumatized. Think about how enamored some folks are with this BLM stuff right now. Just a few months ago, and the virus as well. Yep. Just a few months ago, they seriously thought that the world was weeks, months away from collapsing. The oceans were going to flood the world, and their homes were going to be destroyed by forest fires. And Greta Thunberg is largely responsible for that. So the moment she turns 18, maybe that's when we should publish the book. The moment she turns 18, I think that she will have lost her victim status entirely. My impression of her parents and her handlers, I have a whole documentary on it, Greta Inc. Go to gretainc.com and you can check it out. You might have already seen it. It's one of my favorite pieces of work that I've done at Rebel News. And the point of her handlers is, they're vast and they have a lot of money. These on the left there, that thumbnail that you can see, that's one of Greta Thunberg's security guards that was pushing me around in Stockholm. She had about somewhere between 8 and 12. We couldn't tell completely because a lot of them were undercover. But when you think Greta, you should think money. There is a lot of money behind Greta Thunberg, and her parents are cashing in on it. You can absolutely be sure of that. Whether it's Greta getting contract, like now that the spotlight has been off of Greta now, we should really take a look at their financial situation. Whether or not they're scoring sweet contracts with Harvard University or whatnot, because now she's going to cash in for the rest of her life after she's traumatized the world's youth. Julian Borges, unless you wanted to comment.
And if I could just say, Keean, first of all, I think your work on the Greta file has been absolutely superb. That documentary is must-watch video for sure. And I'm with you. First of all, we must follow the money, as with any story. That is the most important thing. I think in many respects, Greta was the puppet. I'm really interested in who the puppet masters are, i.e. those with ties to the green energy sector who stand to score billions of dollars worth of contracts. And for Greta herself, I think it might go one of two ways. And by the way, I would strongly urge you to keep writing that book because whichever way it goes, I think it's going to be a good read. I think we might see what happens to so many child stars, kids that are in movies or TV series, and they are super worldwide famous. And once they're no longer young and cute anymore, nobody wants them. They're not getting any acting jobs, and they go into a spiral of, substance abuse or breaking the law. There's so many cases like that. Or, Keean, it might go the other way. She will reinvent herself as a young adult. She has got what's known as brand equity. And this will be the new and improved, reimagined Greta. And she'll be trotted out again to get a whole new generation to sign up. But you are right. It is kind of funny how she is about 3 crises removed. Because I think she came in between the Me Too movement and something before Black Lives Matter, but I'm losing track. But in any event, if you write that book, I'm going to read it, Keean.
Great. Don't miss the days, David, when the crises came like once a year?
Yeah. The old days.
One more super chat. How do we best serve our Aboriginal population? Has Canada done well in righting our wrongs, namely with residential schools? How do we move on? I think that's a great question, Julian. Oh, there's still more super chats actually to follow up with that. That's a great question, Julian. And I think that Conservatives get branded as heartless too often because we don't ask questions like this, because there are problems that we need to solve. There are huge problems within the Aboriginal communities that we need to solve. And whether white people don't want to take responsibility for that, so they overreact and say there's no problem, or they're just so frustrated with liberals accusing you of it, or whether people are just unaware of the situation and they think there's more important things to spend our time on. You look at what's going on in reserves, and I was mentioning this earlier, and they're a serious problem because they are structurally disadvantaged people. They are people who they're one of the only people in Canada who actually have government racism actively determining their future in a negative way. And it's because of the Indian Act. It's because of liberal governments throughout the years propping up these communities with with blank checks to the point where you burn down your house, we'll build you a new one. And they'll continue living in this cycle of abuse that has existed since the time of residential schools. At the end of the day, residential schools weren't great. As Jason Kenney's speechwriter said, they weren't genocide. No, they weren't genocide, but they weren't great. Anytime that the government is scooping children up and forcing them to be re-educated, that's a problem, whether they're white or whether they're Aboriginal. It's not a good look on a government. It's a terrible thing to do, and it's caused a cycle of abuse. The way to fix that is by abolishing reserves and treating First Nations folks like everybody else in Canada, giving them a leg up when they might need it. But that leg up is supposed to be getting them into a good paying job so that they can integrate into communities, not saying, here's a check so that you can stay on this reserve where you don't want to live anyways, where you've been abused your whole life. That's the problem. And the government is enabling the cycle of abuse. The way to fix it is by scrapping the Indian Act 100% and giving them a job. That's the way to fix it.
I'm with you, Keean, and that means often leaving the reserve to get one of those jobs. And there are good reserves, don't get me wrong, but there are reserves that are absolutely corrupt, and they're not even audited. And I mean, I used to live in a community in northern Alberta where there was 5 reserves that surrounded it. So I know this to be fact from the natives themselves who would tell me this. The other thing too, the other element in terms of righting wrongs, it is by going through the court system. And if you look over the last several years, Keean, natives going to the Supreme Court have scored many substantial victories. It's not like the white man's deck is totally stacked against them. I would say it's pretty much the opposite these days. So, you know, instead of banning sports nicknames and tearing down statues, maybe this is the rational, mature way to go about it. Hear each case on its merits, and like you said, abolish the Indian Act, and also encourage natives to get off the dole and to go into the cities and towns where the jobs are and get employed there. And what I just said, I think if I was a CBC personality, I'm already in the human resources office and about to have the mallet of cancel culture knock my brains out. So anyway, let's continue with those chats.
I want to stay on what you were saying there about financial reform of the administration of reserves. That's what Stephen Harper did, and it's what Justin Trudeau immediately canceled. It was one of his first acts of government was to say, no, you keep the money hidden. That's his favorite thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Keeping the money, making sure that Canadians aren't aware of where their tax dollars are being spent. There's a problem on 2 sides of this. Canadians should know where their tax money is going. And the folks, the the moms on reserve, the single mothers who are getting absolutely no help from their reserve administration, they should know that the reason why they're not able to put their little Johnny in school is because the chief just bought his third SUV. That's what we should be aware of. And that is one of the first ways of solving this problem, if you're falling short of scrapping the Indian Act entirely.
And I understand the SUV of choice is the Cadillac Escalade, but what do I do?
Yeah.
Anyways, continue on.
So, Julian, to answer your question, hopefully that didn't take too long, but that's what I would do. I would scrap the Indian Act. And then Julian also follows up. He says, I find affirming transgenderism to be contrary to the Hippocratic Oath. This identity absolutely brings great perils, and doctors should know better. Wow, Julian, I'm not sure if you're a frequent commenter on these live chats, but you really keep these things going with some insightful comments. I think that, yeah, absolutely, especially when it comes to children. Frankly, I don't care after the age of 18, but when it comes to children, a doctor enabling someone, a mother will come to the doctor's office, they want to be woke, and the doctor will say, yeah, I mean, this is a valid thing for a 14-year-old to be thinking. We should, have surgery immediately, puberty blockers as well. And the mother says, oh, if the doctor's saying it, and, the woke mob is saying it, then this must be great for my young son or daughter or whatever it is. It is absolutely against the Hippocratic Oath. It is absolutely doing harm to young children. Adults, I don't know. If adult wants to do it, they can do whatever they want. Now, Chris K says, thanks, boys. Thank you, Chris. Old man's just sent in $2. Thank you very much. And Camilla Zapolsky says, Carolina Panthers are offensive to my black cat. Keean, buddy, I'll buy your Greta book ASAP. Oh, David, yeah, well, you know what? I'll send you a signed copy if I end up writing it. Roxanne LaFrance. That's a comment. I don't know what that means. Is that someone that you know?
Can you say that again, Keean, the name?
Roxanne LaFrance.
There is actually a chat under Roxanne's name, I believe, Keean.
Oh, I see. Oh, it says, how did I miss that? It's because Gary didn't post anything. Okay, it makes sense. I'm a boomer. Hit that like button, Roxanne says, and don't wear a mask. Okay, I agree with the first one. The second one, I also think that you should not be forced to wear a mask. The government shouldn't be allowed to tell you to wear one. I think that's a slippery slope. But you know what? And, people in the chat are going to hate me for it. When I'm on a plane, I wear a mask. When I'm in the grocery store, I wear a mask. Because you know what? When I was in Hong Kong, I was actually I was opened up to this idea, and bear with me here. Wearing a mask is actually great because people, A, can't tell who you are, and B, the government can't tell who you are. And I'm convinced that the government is watching me wherever I go. And it's not only our government, but I think that the Chinese government has eyes on me and a lot of Canadians as well. And when I was in Hong Kong, wearing this simple face mask was enough to stop Xi Jinping from carting you off, from raiding your home and throwing you in a gulag in Guangdong province. So, I'm not opposed to masks. I think it was great. I think as much as, I don't like it when Antifa wears them, but I don't like them wearing it because they're actually breaking reasonable laws. In Hong Kong, they were simply standing there with white signs protesting the Chinese government. And I think if they need to hide their identities, that's reasonable. In Canada, wearing a mask to protest, I think that's different. But wearing a mask going about your day-to-day life so the government can't tell what kind of spinach you bought, I don't mind that at all. Kane and Mark says, I'm loving this team today. Too bad, Sheila. I tried to host this with Sheila once, and it just went terribly. Absolutely. Because the problem was, it was technical. I have to Skype in, and Sheila had to Skype in, and doing that sort of screwed with computers, whereas luckily David is in Toronto, so he can chat in studio, and then I'm the only one Skyping in. So I think this looks great, and I think David and I are a great ginger duo.
A great ginger duo. Sounds like a new Marvel comic book.
Yeah. We could be like Jack Posobiec, who just wrote his own comic. I don't know if you've read it. or been on his Patreon. But if you like, he's got his own comic book going because he wants to bring like conservative, ideas to popular culture. This is his whole shtick. We should start a comic, the Ginger Reporter duo.
We should, because I mean, and maybe this speaks to the decline in comic book sales. The amount of wokeness that is finding its way into comic books is just incredible, and there's so many examples. And maybe I'm going off on a tangerine here, but you rarely do see any right of center narrative in comics anymore. And I was talking about Greta reimagining herself. That's a big buzzword in the comic book business these days, Keean, because you have characters that that were, say, white males suddenly becoming a visible minority, or even female. The mighty Thor for the last few years was a female character somehow. And the thing is, when you look at I do believe comics in North America were not all that inclusive to minorities. And then there was a big push in the 70s, and it was sort of an exploitation thing, Keean. You had characters like Black Lightning and Black Goliath, and they were, of course, black superheroes, but why use the word black? I mean, it's not white Spider-Man, white Daredevil. So it was almost like a pandering, to that. And now we have actual characters being reimagined. As I said, the sex is different, the skin color is different. My, vision on this is to introduce new and compelling characters that are female, that are visible minorities, instead of going back and ripping down the statues of the iconic comic book characters, if you will, and coming up with something else, because I don't think the audience is responding favorably to that at all.
Yeah, I don't know if I missed you saying it, but the same thing goes with Black Panther. I think that it was just peak pandering when it came out. It wasn't, and to be fair, I guess to play devil's advocate for some, the black community really rallied around Black Panther, even though it just seems so, maybe it's because it made sense with the animal. Panthers are black, but it just, it seems strange naming a superhero after their skin color. I don't get the appeal to that.
Yeah, I think, and again, that was a real 70s thing, and it kind of fizzled out. But you're right, Black Panther is an actual animal. And, what is kind of hard to believe is that if you look at the origin of the Black Panther comics, I mean, he didn't even have his own comic for the longest time. He was just a sidebar character or a member of the Avengers. He was basically a C-list character in the Marvel Universe, but because, with what we've seen with Black Lives Matter, you're instantly propelled to a different level just based on the skin pigmentation. That is the political correctness of the day. But and like I said, I have no problem with new characters being invented that are visible minorities, female, what have you. But it just seems such an overreach to go to, say, Superman and say, let's make him Asian, which they did. They had a Chinese Superman. That comic only lasted, I think, about 30 issues. And let's make this guy black. Let's make this guy Hindu. Come on. You're in the creativity business. You can come up with some other good, compelling characters, I should think.
The one job that they have is to be creative.
That's right.
So Jewy says started watching Rebel after City Hall reporting, and Spear Thrower says, will you tell us about Miss Sarah Jessera? I don't know what those are. Do you know what that is?
No.
Well, Spear Thrower, he's from London, so maybe that's a British thing. You'll have to give me some more details.
We'll have to Google that, I guess.
And maybe we'll do it in the next live stream. Which actually, Ezra said that I could do another one of these if we hit 500 likes on this thing. And right now we're at 400, so we'll have to see if I'm actually as appealing to the people as I hoped I would be.
Well, we have 6 minutes. Not to put the pressure on.
We were talking about a lot of sports today, and I think it might be good to sort of follow along that theme. I don't know if my internet connection's great out here at my parents' farm or not, but what some folks might have seen was that if you were on the NBA website,
Yes.
And wanted to get a jersey specifically custom made, you could type out any sort of 12-letter string. And if you typed in "Free Hong Kong," it would send back an error message. You could type anything from "kill white men" or "kill cops" or "white power," terrible things. And the NBA would say, yeah, we'll make you up a jersey and we'll send it to your house in 2 weeks. And it only costs you about $50. But if you wanted to say "Free Hong Kong," that was the line. Then you were out of bounds. It was absolutely crazy. Someone actually called into this line. I wrote a story on it specifically. And then right after that, someone called into the line to speak with the NBA store hotline and said, well, I would like a jersey. And they said, okay, well, what are the letters you want on it? And they said, oh, FREEHONG. And then once they spelt it out, they said, oh, you can't do that, sir. And then he said, oh, okay, well, I'll get this one, KILLCOPS. And they said, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then he said,
Unbelievable.
yeah, and the people at the NBA, they just couldn't, it just sort of hit them blindsided. I don't think the staff members actually knew why they couldn't have it. It was obviously an order from above. It was an order from the communists who really seemed to control the NBA. I didn't, until I wrote this story about it, know how much control China had over the NBA.
Well, Keean, I would imagine, sorry, we're having a few technical difficulties, so I was just trying to hear as much as I could there. And I don't know if you touched upon this Free Hong Kong being part of the verboten list. It would have nothing to do, I suppose, with the, billion-dollar marketing agreement that the NBA has with China. I mean, surely they wouldn't let money get in the way of embracing the First Amendment, would they?
No, that's exactly what they're doing here. I didn't realize until I wrote this story that there's actually 500 million Chinese folks in China watching at least one season game of the NBA every year. There's a huge amount of them watching this, and I had no idea. And because there's so many people watching them there, and because they've secured this deal with the Chinese for broadcasting rights and what have you, and they're just so enamored by basketball for some reason, just like Kim Jong-un seems to be. They just love this sport. I don't know why it is. But they're enamored with it, so much so that the NBA actually has 200 full-time staff in Beijing and Shanghai, split between the two, working throughout the year. So there's a huge appetite for that, and obviously the NBA has chosen which side they want to be on. They want to sort of walk this line between being allowed to be broadcast in the United States because they're actually acting legally. You need to support the First Amendment, which they're not doing with these shirts, but they're also not doing at their games. They kicked out a dude for having a sign because we knew that this was sort of a problem a while ago, that they were really sensitive about the Hong Kong issue. A dude brought a sign in that said "Free Hong Kong," and the security came and hauled him out. I think it was Staples Center, maybe, but they're obviously not supportive of the First Amendment, and I think that we're kind of at the point where they need to pick a side. And if they want to broadcast in China, they can go to China. They can go play in China. Ship the teams out there and go play there. If you want to be censorious commies like Xi Jinping. Now, I can't tell if David can hear me. Sort of sitting there, not sure if he can hear what I'm saying. So I'm going to carry on with what I'm talking about, and I'm going to go through the super chats. Kane Enmark again says, "Storm is my favorite hero." Yeah. Yeah, not terrible. A few bad cops represent the whole police community. Then why do people get slammed for calling all protesters thugs? Well, there's a line between what a thuggy protester is, right? When you're in Hong Kong, when you're protesting a real authoritarian communist regime, that's not what a thug is. A thug is folks breaking the laws of a democratic country with reasonable laws, be it in Seattle or Toronto. Those are the thugs that are shooting children who happen to be in a car near the Chaz. The thugs are the ones that are punching reporters in the sides of faces. Jonathan Yaniv, that's a thug. He's a thug. Anyone protesting, and I think that this rule sort of fits for most protesters in North America. No protester can really can really match sort of the grit behind the Hong Kong protesters. There are no protesters across the world that really can shake a stick at them. They're really there for good reasons, and they're actually protesting an authoritarian regime. They're actually brave. The ones that are here, they're just radical, douchebags, really, who have been sitting in their parents' basement for too long and want to, they're upset with the status quo because they got bullied too much in high school, and now we have to deal with them, and the police are the ones sort of enabling them to do that. I think the last super chat of the night, unless there's more of the morning, I suppose.
Two more just came in, Keean.
Sorry?
Oh, two more just came in, but carry on, my friend.
Sarah says Global Economic Security and Reform Act. I'm not sure if that sounds American to me, but the fact that you have you're donating in pounds makes me think that it might be in the United Kingdom. I'll have to Google that, and the next time I'm here doing these live streams, I'd love to chat with you about that. Lesbian Towel says, love that name, geez Louise, says, what's your opinion on the annexation of the West Bank in Israel? David, you have told me in the past that you have strong opinions on that. What do you think?
Well, I think this is Israeli territory going back millennia. This is this is the original part of Israel, and I guess, well, I don't know, maybe if you go to Food Benders at the corner of Bloor and Dufferin in Toronto, you'll get a different kind of sermon if you're not shoved out of the store and called a racist and a Nazi. And what was the word she used for me, Keean? A genocidal maniac. I can't even remember when I last poured boiling water on an anthill, for goodness sakes. But yeah, I'm sorry. I don't buy into that narrative at all, as fashionable as it may be in certain circles, including, I might add, the Democratic Party.
I saw that video of you at that store, and I hadn't heard about it until actually you reported on it. And so when people say they have to go to Rebel News to get the other side of the story, and sometimes the only side of the story, the same goes for me when I'm hearing about Toronto. I can't believe how many crazy whack jobs you guys have in that city. Sometimes I think we need to put a wall around it.
But Keean, hope abounds, and I can tell you, I believe it was last week, they were supposed to have a huge rally in front of Food Benders, and, it was going to be, the usual suspects, the Antifa types. And evidently what happened, because one of the good reporters in this city, Sue Ann Levy of the Toronto Sun, she went out there to cover this, and nobody showed up, including the speaker, who was supposed to, rouse the crowd. So, you know what? That to me was just heartwarming that, the degree of insanity is so not entrenched, even in Toronto, that there was going to be a rally for this restaurant that is run by a very hateful, spiteful woman. And forget about the Israel-Palestine situation. What got her prominence, Keean, is she put out a sandwich board during a Black Lives Matter protest march, and it said F, the full word of F, the police. And when people reacted angrily about that on social media and even verbally at her store, what did she do? She called the police, but not before alleging with zero evidence that the police were behind this harassment campaign. How is this person still in business, selling her overpriced kale sandwiches and salads? I don't know.
Yeah.
One more super chat though, Keean, and then we got to wrap up because I think we're into overtime already. So go ahead, my friend.
We are into OT. Veterans Voice Chris Semchuk says, I've heard that name before. Says, can rebels do a piece on how veterans in Canada have been cast aside? I think veterans in Canada have been cast aside almost as much as, I don't want to pick and choose who's been more attacked by the federal government, but they're in the similar situation to the First Nations in this country. They've been neglected by the federal government, especially under Justin Trudeau, who thinks you're asking too much after you fought and were wounded and scarred for our safety in Afghanistan or wherever you happen to be. I think that it's a travesty what has happened to Veterans Affairs, the ministry itself, especially under the stewardship of the terrible Panther and everyone that has followed since. We need to do much more for them. And as a story pops up, I'm happy to cover it. I'll work on that. Thank you so much, Chris Semchuk, for that super chat. And you know what else, David? I have to note that we did surpass the 500 like mark, which is, I might have to come back.
Congratulations, Keean. You're always welcome. By the way, in regard to that last super chat, let us never forget that is indeed what Justin Trudeau said verbatim. You are asking too much when it came to benefits and pensions. And this was on the heels of cutting a $10.5 million check to Omar Khadr, the Islamist terrorist who killed an ally and partially blinded another one. This Prime Minister has no shame. And yet, whenever there's a veterans issue in the news, when I see mistreatment of these fantastic individuals, it boils my blood. So we have a tips line. If you know of any story that deserves some prominence, folks, please let us know. Anyways, we are way over. Keean, it was a pleasure. That was a super fast hour. Can't believe it's over already. So thank you so much for filling in for Sheila the She-Devil Gun Reid. And on the behalf of Keean, Bexte in Calgary and myself, David Menzies, thank you so much for tuning in. A special thank you for all those that made those super chats. We really do appreciate that. Have a safe day, and I'll see you tomorrow with Sheila. Good day.